Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser in for Vladimir Duthier on this Monday. We are watching all the news coming in the U.S. and around the world. A second apparent assassination attempt of Donald Trump in just over 2 months. The suspect was known to police. What we're learning about him as new details emerge. A long-awaited TikTok hearing begins today that could decide the platform's fate in the U.S. We'll follow along and watch for crucial developments. And we're tracking a potential tropical cyclone as it churns toward the Carolinas. We'll monitor the latest path. This is CBS News 24/7. We start today with that apparent second assassination attempt against Donald Trump. The suspect is expected to face a federal judge at any moment. This happened yesterday at Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, a few miles from Mar-a-Lago. Trump is safe and unharmed. The Secret Service spotted a rifle sticking out from some bushes a few golf holes away from where Trump was standing. They opened fire. The suspect fled in a vehicle, and police arrested 58-year-old Ryan Ruth around 50 miles away. The FBI says he left items in the bushes, including an AK-style weapon at the scene. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides. Christian, you are in West Palm Beach. What are we learning?
Lindsay, at this point, the big question is, how was he able to get so close to the former president, the suspect here, Ryan Routh, apparently, according to officials, about just a few hundred yards away. And officials say that a Secret Service agent spotted him. And once that Secret Service agent spots him, he engages with the suspect. The suspect then runs out of the bushes, runs out into the street, jumps into a vehicle. And at that point, there's an eyewitness who has the presence of mind to jot down the license plate number. As that vehicle speeds away, this individual passes along the information to law enforcement. Law enforcement is then able to arrest him about 50 miles north of here near Martin County. At this point, the investigation continues. We know that the suspect is scheduled to be in court at some point today. We'll have to see what sort of charges are brought against him. We know now that he's been in federal detention and that he'll face federal charges. We know that the state has stepped back. The Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office has stepped back and is letting the feds sort of handle whatever charges he's going to face. I should mention that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says that the state is going to hold its own investigation into this incident, saying in a statement that it's so that everyone knows the truth about what happened.
Christian, what are you hearing about the response from Secret Service?
Well, that's the big question here. What sort of response is it that they ended up having? We know that there was a Secret Service agent that spotted the suspect out there, and that's what eventually led to the suspect fleeing, and that's what it led to him getting caught because of that eyewitness. But during a press conference yesterday, I asked officials, well, what sort of security does the former president currently have? And what they explained is that you got to remember that because he is not a sitting president, he does not have the level of protection that, let's say, President Biden would have. They explained that if a sitting president was at this golf course, they likely would have closed it off before the former president was able to get onto the golf course. So there are questions now because you've got 2 assassination attempts against the former president, according to the FBI now. Is there a change that needs to be made to his security detail when it comes to his Secret Service protection? We'll have to see how all of that develops. Lindsay.
Christian, appreciate it. Thank you. Let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, Trump is expected to meet with the acting Secret Service director today. What do we know about that, and what is Trump saying?
Yeah, Lindsay, Trump is seeking to assure allies and Americans that he is okay several times yesterday, sending out fundraising texts saying he is alive and well, later on saying that his resolve is stronger than ever. Last night, we heard from him directly in a Truth Social post where he thanked the people who were involved, the Secret Service agents who acted before anything could happen to him, and thanking people for reaching out to him and saying he's proud to be an American. But now this is moving into the next phase where Donald Trump will be meeting with the acting Secret Service director. Trump met with the former Secret Service director after the previous assassination attempt, so this seems to be in line with their process of how they're looking at this and how they're starting this investigation. We're also asking the campaign whether he'll be meeting with the FBI, witness statements, any of those sorts of things, because this is an active investigation that involves the former president, another assassination attempt that has rattled his campaign and worried allies and aides that I've talked to. There's a lot of concern there about his safety going forward on the campaign trail.
That said, though, will there likely be any changes to the campaign schedule?
You know, at this moment, they're telling me that's not likely. As Trump did after the first assassination attempt, we know he went right to the Republican National Convention the next day, and then he held a rally just a week later in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Trump will be returning to Michigan tomorrow in Flint, Michigan, this time for a town hall. And then he's expected to hold a rally in New York in Uniondale, Long Island, come Wednesday. So Trump says he's still going to be moving forward with his schedule. Campaign allies say that's important to show that resolve, that Trump is undeterred by these threats against his life. It remains to be seen, though, as Christian was talking about, what Secret Service protections look like going forward. He was on the golf course on a, quote, day off or a down day from the campaign with donors and allies, and something like this happened to him again. So there's a lot of questions about what the bubble around him looks like, what campaign events are going to be approved in the future, and really just how he's going to move forward with the Secret Service protection.
All right, Olivia, appreciate your reporting in the wake of this. Thank you. Joining me now for more from reaction from Washington is senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, we just heard President Biden speak a few moments ago. What did he say?
Lindsay, President Biden said that he thanked God that the former president was okay. And he also said that it was clear that Secret Service needs more resources. And he thought that Congress should respond to the need in the coming weeks. When asked specifically what it was, whether it was personnel or more money for other things, he said personnel. And so the president speaking out for the first time after the second assassination attempt on the former president as he was heading to Philadelphia.
I'm wondering, and I'm going to go ahead and ask our control room if we have that sound now. Can we go ahead and play that?
I think they thank God the president's okay. I think we got a full report so far. We're down there tonight. But one thing I want to make clear, the service needs more help. And I think the Congress should respond to their needs if they, in fact, need more services. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Are you concerned more rhetorically in this environment? They need more personnel. They need more money. What kind of help do you say?
I think we need some more personnel. I think they're deciding whether they need more personnel or not.
So, Weijia, this is, we heard from a statement from the White House. Now we're hearing from the president. Do you expect that we may hear from this, for example, when he's in Philadelphia today?
Well, he could bring it up. I mean, he just talked about it, and he's going to Philadelphia for a totally separate event addressing the Nationally Historic Black Colleges meeting. And so I guess there's a chance he could bring it up again. But he tends to like to separate issues unless he hasn't spoken on it already and it's new. So because he made these remarks, it's hard to say, but probably not, because he's addressing, college students and about historically black colleges around the country. So I'm not sure, but this is obviously going to be an ongoing issue with so many mounting questions about how this could happen again. And the vice president also released a statement saying that she condemns any political violence and that she's just deeply disturbed by what unfolded.
Weijia, thank you so much.
Sure.
The person suspected of igniting the massive line fire in Southern California will be arraigned today. That wildfire is still burning, by the way. 34-year-old Justin Halstenberg is charged with arson. Now, the line fire has burned at least 38,000 acres in little more than a week. Officials say it is nearly 50% contained. Let's go ahead and bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bila with a first look at the national forecast. Kate, what are you tracking?
Well, what we're tracking this morning, Lindsay, really is the tropics. And in fact, it's a potential tropical cyclone that's formed along the coast of the Carolinas. It does not have much more time to strengthen, but it could become a tropical storm by the end of the day. I want to pull up our map here and kind of show you the area that we're focusing on. And we're also going to pull up our current radar and some watches and warnings, plus that cone from the National Hurricane Center. And the area we're focusing on is here over North and South Carolina. The heaviest rain is to the north of the cone. You can see that cone from, again, the National Hurricane Center, which does forecast this to become Tropical Storm Helen by this afternoon. The heaviest rain right now along the coast of North Carolina, and that's where we also find some flash flood warnings. So let's go ahead and put the map down, and we'll take a look at what this looks like on our satellite and radar composite. This is a very fast-moving storm in that it's going to likely be on land within the next 6 to 12 hours. So the question is, will it have the time to develop into a tropical storm? Regardless whether it's named or not, the impacts are the same, and it's heavy flooding rain. You can see where it is right now, just south of Wilmington, North Carolina. Rain coming down at a very heavy rate, and this is all pushing inland over North Carolina and northern South Carolina today. So here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Again, this is potential tropical cyclone 8. Doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it? But as we head through the afternoon, this is expected to strengthen into Tropical Storm Helen and then move onshore and become post-tropical by tomorrow and into Wednesday. And it will fizzle pretty quickly as we get into tomorrow, but it will bring the threat for as much as 3 or 4 inches of rain to portions of South Carolina and North Carolina today and into tomorrow, and could spread toward the northeast as well. I'll have more on that coming up a little bit later in the broadcast. Lindsay, I'll send it back to you.
Sounds good, Kate. Thank you. Racially motivated violence, bomb threats, and forced lockdowns all happening in Springfield, Ohio, as Trump and his running mate double down on false claims about immigrants eating pets. How residents are responding. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We are bringing you live pictures out of West Palm Beach, Florida, where the suspect involved in the apparent second assassination attempt against former President Trump is appearing in federal court right now. In his first appearance, our CBS News correspondent Manuel Bojorquez is in the courtroom and will update us as soon as that ends. We will bring that to you once he is in front of a camera. Well, TikTok's parent company ByteDance is appealing a law passed by Congress forcing the company to sell the social media app or face a ban in the U.S. The company is presenting oral arguments in court right now. So for more, let's bring in CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. I mean, Jan, this could be TikTok's last-ditch effort to keep its ownership. What are they arguing today?
Well, they're saying that this law, which obviously Congress passed and now the Justice Department is defending, violates the First Amendment and is unconstitutional because all the millions and hundreds of millions of Americans who use TikTok have a First Amendment right to use whatever social media app that they choose, no matter who owns it. Now, the Justice Department is arguing that, as was the purpose of this law, that TikTok, owned by this Chinese company, constitutes a national security threat. And that's why they're saying it has to be sold to a non-Chinese company for it to continue doing business in the United States. They're focusing, and the government's focusing, on this national security issue, saying that because it's owned by a Chinese company, TikTok could, conceivably turn over all this data that it has on 170 million Americans to the Chinese government. And also that the Chinese government kind of could force TikTok to do how it does the content and algorithms and manipulate American public opinion.
So, Jan, who is deciding the fate of TikTok, and when might we know what the decision is?
So this decision, this argument this morning is before a 3-judge panel here in D.C., the Federal Appeals Court. The law specifically said that it would be held here in D.C. before this court because the national security interest at stake, and this court being in D.C. has a lot more experience with that. But this is not going to be the final word. They're hearing arguments this morning on whether or not this law can be blocked, as TikTok is hoping to do. But regardless of whoever wins in this case, guess what? The big court, just down the street, the Supreme Court, they're going to have to get involved in this. And whether they take it up or not, the Supreme Court will have that final word. Now, the law, there's supposed to be, according to the law, TikTok is supposed to be sold by January of next year. It can extend a little if it looks like they're in talks to sell, but the clock is ticking. So when we'll get this decision today, I don't think it'll take, months, but it'll take some time. It's complicated issues for these judges to evaluate the arguments. And then when we get that decision, let's say in a month, 6 weeks, whatever, whoever loses is going to go right to the Supreme Court. And then the ball will be in the Justices Court to decide what they're going to do with it. So this is kind of an intermediate stage in the fight, and it is far from over.
And Jan, I don't think we can talk about this without reminding people 150 million people use this, and a lot of influencers are also on the side of TikTok because they don't want their livelihoods taken away. I mean, this is truly, an app that many people spend hours on a day.
Right, and I mean, you've seen when the law was passed, about half the Americans thought, yeah, go ahead and let's force this sale to a non-Chinese company. But that support for this law and the government's position in public opinion anyway is kind of gradually eroding as TikTok is making its case, certainly all over the place in the media and elsewhere, that this is, violating Americans' First Amendment rights. But how this court evaluates it, it's a really interesting panel of judges. You've got a very respected liberal judge. You've got a very respected conservative judge on this 3-judge panel. They kind of sometimes mirror arguments and positions that you hear in the Supreme Court. So I think the arguments today will give us a pretty good sense of how the legal analysts are going to be taking a look at this separate from the court of public opinion.
All right, Jan, thank you so much. Appreciate you as always. Well, in the past week, threats of violence in Springfield, Ohio have prompted schools, hospitals, and city offices to evacuate or close. And it follows former President Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance's unfounded claims about Haitian immigrants stealing and eating pets. Well, Vance doubled down on those comments yesterday on Face the Nation.
Now, you said that these are false rumors. Well, I've heard about a dozen things from my constituents in Springfield, Ohio. 10 of them are verifiable and confirmable. A couple of them we have direct firsthand accounts of, for example, migrants abducting geese at the local park and slaughtering them and eating them. Now, maybe all of these constituents are lying to me, but I would appreciate if the American media showed up and did some real investigation rather than amplifying the worst people in the world.
CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is live in Springfield, Ohio. And of course, Nicole, we're going to ask you about what residents and officials are saying, but we have to say there that the media is not amplifying. The media is talking to officials and confirming that none of these cases are substantiated.
Well, a number of officials have debunked these claims from the governor on down. I mean, he calls them garbage. We spoke to the local mayor here as well, who says that these claims are unfounded or not true. And what's really disturbing to him is that he feels that this is really taking a toll on this community. It's overwhelming them. He told me that he feels like they're caught up in this political vortex, particularly as the former president and Senator Vance appear to be doubling down on these claims. And so he basically said that it's very concerning to him. And this comes after a rash of bomb threats and lockdowns that occurred here over the weekend and over the past few days. Take a listen to what he told me about some of the threats that are coming into this town.
They're hateful in nature, very spiteful and hateful in nature, and threatening, very threatening.
I mean, in what sense?
Just direct threats to harm to individuals, like I said, myself and others, and bomb threats and harm to our city. I think it would be very difficult to have either candidate here in Springfield, Ohio right now. It's a very hot environment.
Now, at this point, we don't have any knowledge of whether the former president may come here to Springfield. But as you heard there, it is of concern to the mayor. And as you heard him say there, it would be very difficult. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really taking a toll on the community in the sense that they have really had to cancel a lot of events. There are 2 colleges here in the area that have gone virtual, and they're not having the students attend in person because of some of the threats that have been lobbed at various various institutions here. And just a short time ago, we learned the city is also canceling what is called its City Fest, which is a very popular event. It's an opportunity to celebrate the city's culture and diversity, but out of concern and after consultation with law enforcement, the city now says it will not have that event at the end of the month. Lindsay.
Wow. Okay, Nicole Killian, thank you. The suspect in the apparent assassination attempt involving the former president in Florida was known by police and known to our very own Holly Williams. She joins us next with more on the suspect's apparent ties to the war in Ukraine. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following. 33,000 Boeing factory workers in the Seattle area are on strike for a fourth day. Flights are not expected to be disrupted, but the strike brought Boeing production to a screeching halt. Factory workers overwhelmingly voted to reject a proposed contract last week, claiming it didn't meet their needs or demands. The man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students was transferred to a jail in Boise. Authorities say Brian Kohberger was loaded onto an Idaho State Police plane yesterday and flown to Boise, where he will stand trial next year for the stabbing deaths of 4 students in 2022. Last week, the state Supreme Court moved the trial from Moscow, Idaho, about 300 miles from Boise, and where the crime was committed after Kohberger's attorneys argued extensive media coverage would make it difficult to find an impartial jury. 4 private astronauts splashed down off the coast of Florida. This marked the end of SpaceX's historic Polaris Dawn mission over the weekend. Tech billionaire Jarek Isaacman and his 3 crewmates completed their 5-day mission, which included the first ever spacewalk by civilian astronauts. Well, we are starting to get a clearer picture of the suspect in the apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. The 58-year-old man is in custody. Here he is right here after he was spotted pointing an AK-style rifle from the edge of the Florida golf course where the former president was golfing Sunday. He was later captured by police after fleeing the area. The suspect in the case also happens to be familiar to our Holly Williams, who joins us live from London. So, Holly, how did you come into contact with Ryan Ruth?
Hey there, Lindsay. Look, when I woke up this morning here in London to the news that Ryan Ruth was the suspect in an alleged assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, I was absolutely stunned to recognize the name because I had been in touch with Ryan Ruth for over a year in the early stages of the war in Ukraine. Like thousands of other international volunteers, he apparently went into Ukraine to help. Now, I don't believe that he was fighting himself, but he had put up signs in Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, offering to help other foreigners find places in Ukrainian battalions. And that's how I initially came across him. I spoke with him, I think, once on the phone and texted with him pretty frequently. And he put me in touch with several foreign fighters in Ukraine. In November of last year, he told me that he was back in the US, in Hawaii, and that is the last I heard of him until this very surprising news.
What were your impressions of him?
You know, he seemed very genuine and passionate about supporting Ukraine. He mentioned via text message plans to bring in thousands of Afghan and Syrian fighters to Ukraine, which I took with a grain of salt, really. In an interview with the news website Semaphore, he claimed he'd been unable to get visas for those Afghan visas, but we don't know if he was actually in touch with any Ukrainian officials at all. Now, I've met American volunteers everywhere from Syria in the fight against ISIS to Ukraine. Some of them are experienced soldiers and very clear about the dangers that they're facing. Others have seemed less well informed, and sometimes their motivations can be quite confused. To be honest, Ryan Ruth did at times seem fairly naive. At one point, he even sent me an audio track of a song he'd apparently recorded about the carnage caused by the war in Ukraine. He did not seem to be a hardened fighter. Lindsay.
Holly Williams, thank you. I want to bring in former Secret Service agent Charles Marino to talk about this. Charles, thanks for being here.
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning. Based on what we know right now, which, I mean, the details, we know a little bit more than we did yesterday about what happened. But, you know, from the agent apparently spotting the barrel of the gun through a fence while the suspect was crouched in the bushes, to a witness being able to take a picture of the suspect's license plate as he drove away, to the be on the lookout alert that triggered the license plate reader in Martin County along the I-95 that led to his capture. What is your assessment so far about the successes and failures?
There were both, and both can be true at the same time when it comes to the mission of the Secret Service. We saw an exceptional response, once again, from the inner ring of security that provides security immediately around the former president. You had agents in advance out ahead of the former president by about 500 yards, conducting their advance of the route, looking for threats. And once they determined they saw the barrel of this weapon coming through the fence, they took justified action against the suspect. Now, where the failures are, and this is a question the Secret Service has to answer, has to once again do with the perimeters. The same conversation we had about Butler, Pennsylvania. And that is the Secret Service planning and providing resources to meet the specific threat level of the former president? For example, should there have been more resources on the outer perimeter of the club, kind of scouring, looking for potential threats and serving as an overall deterrence to people like this suspect? That it has to be answered by the service. It has not yet. As far as the investigation of this individual, it's no surprise that he came to the attention of local law enforcement. I also wouldn't be surprised if we hear that he was on the radar of both the FBI and the Secret Service based on his actions having to do with the war in Ukraine. But what I can tell you is that we still have outstanding questions. We still have not heard, for example, the results of a search warrant on his vehicle. Were there additional weapons, for example, in that vehicle that he fled in? And also, were there items of what we call protective interest? Meaning, are there details in the vehicle that would provide information about any type of surveillance that this suspect was conducting on the former president, to include maps of the golf club, maps of Mar-a-Lago, maybe any other notes or items of interest? That's going to be important for us to hear. As far as law enforcement goes, they need to continue to be transparent. This is one of the lessons learned from Butler. They did not get out ahead of this. They did not communicate with the American public the way they needed to, and they need to change that in this situation. But the American people have to be assured that the former president, the current president, the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, that they're all protected the way that they need to be by the agency.
Well, and we know that this suspect was apparently 300 to 500 yards away, 2 golf holes away from the former president. I mean, does that seem remarkably close to you? And all of the experts that we've talked to in really less than 24 hours, because this happened just before 2 yesterday, have said how difficult it is to secure a place like a golf course. The Palm Beach County Sheriff himself yesterday said he's not the president, so he doesn't have that full detail. I mean, there are so many questions about what resources the Secret Service right now is lacking and what they need. Will it come down to resources?
Well, if you're staffing according to the title alone, then this is going to keep happening. And that's why I bring up the important point of staffing and resourcing and planning to the threat level that the protectee, the former president, is actually facing. If the Secret Service is going to say, look, we're going to just staff this the way we think a former president should be staffed, that is not going to fly with the American public. And it's certainly not going to meet the threats that the former president is facing, both domestically and from foreign adversaries like Iran, based on the actions he took against Soleimani. So I can tell you that they're going to have to provide more and more resources to achieve the mission. and provide that overall ring of security. Again, 3 concentric rings, an inner perimeter, middle perimeter, and outer perimeter, that's going to serve as a greater deterrence and provide a buffer. Because if we rely on the inner perimeter security, the detail that's assigned to the former president full time to have to react each and every time, something's going to get missed. And the former president is going to get hurt again, or he's going to ultimately be killed, which we do not want to have happen.
Charles, always appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Kamala Harris says she is thankful former President Trump is safe after yesterday's incident. She thanked law enforcement for their help and says we all must do our part to ensure this incident does not lead to more violence. CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro joins me now for more on the campaign. Aaron, how is the campaign responding?
Hey, Lindsay, good to be with you. So far, they have not. Of course, this is a developing situation, and they seem to be going full steam ahead with 50 days left. Vice President Harris will be holding a roundtable with the Teamsters Labor Union in D.C. later today. But they pointed to Vice President Harris's statement to start, and you read a little bit about that. She also said that she commends the U.S. Secret Service and that her and President Biden will make sure that they have the resources they need to carry out their mission.
The vice president will sit down for an interview with the National Association of Black Journalists tomorrow. What are we expecting out of that?
This was an interview that was supposed to happen in the late summer, but as Harris was just kicking off her candidacy, got punted to now. It'll be a similar format to former President Trump's appearance at the NABJ conference in Chicago earlier this year. She will be on stage with 3 other selected moderators. We are also expecting a Hispanic radio host to interview Harris, or that interview to air on Tuesday, and it's all part of the Harris campaign's ramping up of her appearances with local media, national media, and media directed with electorates she needs, such as Hispanic and Black voters.
Aaron, thank you. Parts of the Carolinas are under a tropical storm warning right now. Helen is moving toward the South Carolina coast and expected to make landfall this afternoon. High wind could blow in dangerously high surf and some coastal flooding, and heavy rainfall is expected to bring flash flooding to some parts at least until tomorrow morning. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo. Kate, what are you tracking when it comes to Helen?
We are watching the storm continue to develop, Lindsay, and it's moving very slowly. It's very, very close to the coast of the Carolinas, so it's bringing intense downpours to that region, and that is not going to quit anytime soon. I want to pull up our map here, and let's take a look at where the storm is. We'll pull up the radar and the current satellite, and you can see this large system that had kind of formed along the boundary that was once associated with what was Hurricane Francine. Now this cyclone has fired up and expected to be Helen, moving onshore through the rest of the afternoon and into this evening over portions of really southern North Carolina is likely where the storm will come on shore. So let's pull up our national map here, and you can kind of see where the cone of concern will be with Helen as the storm comes on shore. We'll take a look at, again, the cone of concern from the National Hurricane Center brings Helen to tropical storm force and then just to a remnant low pretty quickly once it moves inland. But you can see all of that rain is already starting. We have a number of flash flood warnings in effect, and also tropical storm warnings as well. Tropical storm warning for much of the coast of North Carolina, and we do have the threat for some severe weather as well as that storm comes on shore. By the way, as we walk across the map here, I want to point out a wind advisory in the west, which could fan the flames of some of those wildfires. There's also a winter weather advisory in the mountains of California, where 1 to 3 inches of slushy snow is expected today. So things going on basically on both coasts here. But let's talk more about potential tropical cyclone number 8, Helen, moving toward the coast of North Carolina. Very heavy rain, and where you see these maroon boxes, those are flash flood warnings, and more rain still to come as the day goes on. Expected to strengthen into a tropical storm. Again, Helen, and moving inland, and then very quickly back to a subtropical remnant low. It will fizzle quickly. The problem is we're then going to see a transfer of energy towards a new coastal low by Wednesday or Thursday, and that will develop off the coast of New Jersey and Delaware and bring the threat for some locally heavy rain to parts of New Jersey Jersey, Delaware, and eventually to New York and parts of New England as well. But as far as impacts for the Carolinas are concerned, peak winds sustained 35 to 45 miles an hour with gusts as high as 70 miles per hour. That, of course, can cause wind damage and trees down, power outages. There is a widespread flood watch in effect, as well as those flash flood warnings. We're looking at a widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain with this and locally higher amounts. And as the storm comes onshore, because of the rotation with a tropical system like this, you will have the threat for isolated tornadoes throughout the Carolinas today. So where you see the red here, basically the coast of North and South Carolina, it's a tropical storm warning, and that goes until early Thursday. There is the flood watch as well. And again, we expect excessive rainfall and the threat for severe weather as the storm comes onshore. It's going to be a wild ride there. And again, some heavy rain continuing right through tomorrow. Lindsay, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Kate, thank you so much. We continue to monitor live pictures out of West Palm Beach, Florida, where the suspect involved in the apparent second assassination attempt of former President Trump is appearing in this federal courthouse. CBS News correspondent Moel Bojorquez is inside. He will update us as soon as that hearing wraps up. But for now, you're watching CBS News 24/7. The strongest typhoon to hit Shanghai in more than 7 decades brought the bustling financial hub to a standstill today. Typhoon Babinka made landfall overnight, packing winds of up to 49 miles per hour, and at least one person has been injured. Nearly 400 homes have lost power. More than 400,000 people were evacuated ahead of the storm's arrival, and more than 1,400 flights were canceled at the city's 2 airports yesterday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is vowing Yemen's Houthi rebels will pay a heavy price for a missile launched into central Israel. It's the first time the group reached that far into the country. Israel says its defenses intercepted the missile. No one was injured, but there was some damage. Meanwhile, Israel's military says 3 hostages whose bodies were recovered in December likely died in an Israeli airstrike. The IDF said, quote, there is a high probability they were a byproduct of a strike during the assassination of a senior Hamas leader last November. Well, we are going to shift gears because we have a story about the golden age of podcasting, and there are many who don't get as far as this 9-year-old award-winning podcaster in San Jose. CBS News Bay Area's Kevin Coe shows us the Williams Elementary School student who was recognized nationally by filling in some of the harshest gaps in her family's history.
This is 9-year-old Amaya Desai's happy place.
They take me to a place where I want to be.
Amaya loves books, specifically a good story.
We have the introduction, which is the beginning. Then you have the rising action.
Her commitment to storytelling led her to this short story contest award from the San Jose Public Library. But unlike many of the books she loves to read, the story she told was a piece of family history.
My grandfather at a young age was forced from his homeland in Uganda.
Amaya's grandpa was in Uganda in 1972 when the country's Asian minority was ordered to leave the country within 30 days.
There's so many wars happening right now, and there's so many people that are being displaced, and I said this would make a great podcast.
Amaya was ready to take her story to the digital airwaves with the help of her executive producer.
Testing.
Nikhil Desai is Amaya's dad.
We had never done a podcast before. I have no idea how to do a podcast, but to support my daughter, I learned.
Nikhil's dad is Amaya's grandpa.
As he was telling his story to Amaya, there were a lot of little details that I had never known about growing up, and so it made me feel closer to my dad, made me understand him more, and it made me look back at his history through a different lens.
With the help of her parents,
we're just her sidekicks that support.
Or her sidekicks, Amaya made a podcast about her grandpa's displacement. Her target audience, her peers.
I can't imagine what the adults feel. I'm not an adult yet.
It turns out the adults at NPR loved it. Up against 4th graders nationwide, Amaya's podcast won NPR's Student Podcast Challenge, and her story was featured nationally. A story almost untold until Amaya reached back a couple generations in her family's history.
None of us ever expected that would happen, but it sort of takes it to a whole new level in terms of cementing his legacy. And that's really what I take away from it all.
I don't think that these stories should just lie in wait. I think that when we share it, we are helping the next generation thrive.
Amaya isn't sure what her next story will be.
I feel very proud that I'm surrounded with love, and I know that I couldn't have done it without it.
With her sidekicks by her side, she's ready for her next headline.
Incredible story there. Well, the stars were out for TV's big night, and there were some surprises during last night's Emmys. We're going to bring them to you next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Tito Jackson, a member of the Jackson 5 and brother to Michael and Janet Jackson, has died. Jackson's sons posted on Instagram that the Rock and Roll Hall of Famer died yesterday. No cause was given. Tito is a background singer and played guitar as a member of the Jackson 5. Their #1 singles include ABC and I'll Be There. Tito Jackson was 70. Television's biggest night had some big moments at the 76th Primetime Emmy Awards. CBS News' Carissa Lawson brings us the highlights from last night's red carpet.
FX's The Bear came into the night with a record 23 nominations and took home several awards, including Best Lead Actor.
Jeremy Allen White, The Bear.
Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series.
Evan Moss Baccarat.
And Best Supporting Actress, Liza Colón Zayas, the first Latina to win in that category.
To all the Latinas who are looking at me, keep believing and vote.
But it was HBO's Hacks that beat The Bear to win Best Comedy Series, the biggest surprise of the night. The historical drama Shogun swept the top drama categories, including Outstanding Drama Series.
You guys greenlit a very expensive, subtitled Japanese period piece whose central climax revolves around a poetry competition.
The hugely popular but highly contentious Netflix series Baby Reindeer, created by Richard Gadd, won awards for lead actor, supporting actress, writing, and outstanding limited series. And when it came to great moments, this ensemble reunion of The West Wing received one of the biggest applauses of the night.
It's hard to believe that just 25 years ago, Aaron and the writers actually had to use their imaginations to create interesting plot lines for The West Wing.
A night of laughter, glitz, and glamour, and some history-making moments, too.
All right, Carissa, thanks. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo. Kate, did any of your shows win?
You know, I haven't seen The Bear yet, and I feel like I have to make a point to see that now. So that's going to be next up on the docket for me. But yeah, it was a great night. I just love looking at all the fashions and all that. And let's talk about the forecast, though, today, because, you know, it's not looking quite so pretty outside, especially if you're in the Carolinas. We are getting inundated there, and this is potential tropical cyclone number 8, likely to become Helen. We are watching closely for that update, which comes through at 11 o'clock. We sometimes get it early, but so far have not gotten word on whether they have named that storm just yet. You can see we've got the heavy rain, though, moving into southern North Carolina. And again, this is still expected to become, this is the 11 o'clock advisory. This just came through, by the way. This automatically updates for us. It is not yet Helen, but we do still expect that this may develop into Tropical Storm Helen. The latest update, though, as you can see from the National Hurricane Center, which I'm now seeing for the first time along with you, keeps this as a subtropical or potential tropical storm. So something to watch, but the impacts are the same regardless. And the biggest impact will be heavy flooding rain. Flood watches have been posted all throughout the Carolinas. We could see 2, 3, even 4+ inches of rain, especially northern South Carolina. And some of this moisture may spread right up the eastern seaboard by the end of the week as a new low develops off the coast of New Jersey by Wednesday or Thursday, putting an end to a stretch of some spectacular sunshine we've had, at least here in Philadelphia and in most of the Northeast lately. Lindsay, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Kate, thank you. We continue to monitor pictures out of West Palm Beach, Florida. Soon, the suspect in the apparent second assassination attempt against Trump is in his first court appearance right now. Our Manny Bojorquez is inside. We will bring that to you as soon as we learn more. You're watching CBS News 24/7.